All living things reproduce themselves. They have offspring. These offspring look a lot like their parents.
In fact, some living things produce offspring that are exactly like themselves. These bacteria, for example, reproduce by dividing in two. Each of the new bacteria has the same genes as the original parent. This is called asexual reproduction because only one parent is involved. Now, if I were to divide in two like that, the world would be blessed with two of me. And if each of these two me's were to divide, there would be 4 exact copies. You can see how this might get a little tiresome, having so many of me around.
Fortunately, that's not how we humans reproduce, or most animals and plants for that matter. We reproduce by sexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, offspring inherit genetic characteristics from 2 parents.
You may have had someone tell you that you have your father's eyes or your mother's smile. Obviously, you don't have their eyes or smile. They have them, but you do have their genes. And these genes give you the shape and color of your eyes and the contours of your mouth, and a whole lot more.
So how do we inherit these genes? And how does a new human being form? In human sexual reproduction, 2 different kinds of sex cells, an egg from the mother and a sperm from the father, join together. And from the fusion of these 2 cells and the genetic information they contain, a new individual develops inside a woman, and after about 9 months, a baby is born. That's the really short version of how human reproduction occurs.
To fill in the details, we need to start a little earlier in the story by looking at the different reproductive systems of males and females. It's hardly news that males and females are different.
But besides making our lives a whole lot more interesting, these differences make it possible for us to produce the different kinds of sex cells, eggs and sperm.
In males, the reproductive system is made up of a pair of testes, a variety of tubes called ducts, several glands, the penis, and the scrotum. Let's start with the testes. The testes produce sperm and male sex hormones such as testosterone. The sex hormones maintain the male's physical build: wide shoulders, narrow waist, tall stature. These hormones are also necessary for sperm to be produced.
The testes are in a pouch of skin outside the core of the body called the scrotum. The testes don't function well at body temperature. In the scrotum, the testes are kept several degrees cooler, the ideal temperature for sperm production.
When we look inside the testes, we see tiny coiled tubes. Sperm are produced inside these tubes. Cells that line the tubes divide to form the sex cells. These cells go through a series of changes that create the sperm.
Inside the head of each sperm is the material that contains the genetic information that a man contributes to the development of a new human. This genetic information ensures that a child will have some of the characteristics of his or her father.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The likelihood of any one particular sperm doing this is really small. In his early teens, a male starts producing millions of sperm every day. This continues throughout adulthood. While inside the male's body, sperm can live about 2 months. When the sperm are formed, they're pushed out of the testes into an area called the epididymis that's on the top of each testis. The epididymis is both a nursery where the sperm mature and a waiting area where they stay until they're needed.
Like the testes and scrotum, the penis is outside the core of the body. The penis has 3 columns of spongy tissue. When a guy is sexually excited, blood fills this tissue and makes the penis erect.
If he's excited enough, sperm leave the epididymis and travel through the sperm ducts. Secretions from several glands are added along the way. Together, the secretions and sperm are called semen.
Semen is pushed from the sperm ducts and into the urethra, which runs out of the body through the penis. The release of semen from the body is called ejaculation.
Ejaculation doesn't just happen as a result of having sex. Most teenage boys have had the experience of waking up in the morning to wet and sticky sheets, the result of a nocturnal emission or wet dream. This might cause some embarrassment, but it's totally natural and normal.
That wraps up an overview of the male reproductive system, one half of the partnership necessary for human reproduction to occur. Now we'll look at the other half. Most of the female reproductive system lies deep inside the pelvis. There are a pair of ovaries and a pair of fallopian tubes, which are connected to the uterus, which is about the size of a pear. At the base of the uterus is a very strong muscle called the cervix. The cervix is at the top of the vagina, which opens to the outside of the body. The vulva is the external part of the female reproductive system. It includes the major and minor lips, the openings of the urethra and vagina, and the clitoris. Like the penis in a male, the clitoris has many nerve endings that make it very sensitive to touch.
Just as the testes in a male produce sperm and hormones, the female's two ovaries produce eggs and sex hormones, such as estrogen. When a girl reaches puberty, these hormones cause some major changes in her body. Breasts develop, hips get broader. Her hormones also control the production of mature eggs in pregnancy.
An egg contains the genetic information that a woman contributes to the development of a new human being. Each ovary contains hundreds of eggs. Unlike males who produce new sex cells their whole lives, females are born with all of the eggs they will have.
A hormone from the brain stimulates an immature egg to begin to develop. It also stimulates the lining of the uterus to become thicker. About every 28 days, hormones trigger the release of a mature egg from one of the ovaries.
Tiny, finger-like projections on a fallopian tube beat and draw the egg in. The egg travels through the fallopian tube. If it doesn't run into a sperm, it continues into the uterus. Inside the uterus, the egg disintegrates and the signal "no pregnancy" goes out. This triggers the breakdown of the lining of the uterus. The blood and cell debris leave the body. This is called menstruation.
Okay, we've looked at the female and male reproductive systems that make it possible for humans to reproduce.
Now we'll look at how those systems work together and the events that lead to a new human life. For a new human being to form, an egg and a sperm have to get together. During sexual intercourse, the male's penis releases or ejaculates semen containing millions of sperm into the vagina. The sperm begins swimming towards the cervix. Of the millions of sperm in the vagina, only a tiny fraction are able to get through the cervix and into the uterus. Propelled by their whip-like tails, sperm continue to swim through the uterus and into the fallopian tubes.
If an egg is traveling through a fallopian tube on its journey to the uterus, it will encounter the sperm. Hundreds of the much smaller sperms surround it and struggle to get inside. The egg is covered with a jelly-like coating that acts as a barrier. Enzymes from the sperm break down this barrier. Eventually, a single sperm is able to reach the egg.
As soon as the sperm crosses the egg cell membrane, leaving its tail behind, the membrane thickens, preventing any more sperm from entering. The genetic material from the head of the sperm fuses with genetic material in the nucleus of the egg. This is called fertilization.
As soon as fertilization occurs, the egg, now called a zygote, begins to divide rapidly as it continues its journey to the uterus. By the time the zygote reaches the uterus, it is a tiny hollow ball slightly larger than the diameter of a human hair. It burrows into the thickened wall of the uterus. Cells from the zygote and cells from the wall of the uterus together begin to form the placenta.
Later in the pregnancy, the placenta will provide nourishment to the growing embryo and fetus and get rid of waste. But at this earlier stage, the placenta produces a hormone that signals a woman's brain that she's pregnant. This prevents the maturing of eggs in her ovaries, and for the duration of the pregnancy, she no longer menstruates.
Fertilization has occurred, the zygote has attached itself inside the uterus, the placenta is forming. Pregnancy has begun.
Pregnancy lasts roughly 280 days from the last menstrual period and is divided into trimesters of about 12 to 13 weeks each. In the first trimester, the egg is released and is fertilized. During the early part of the first trimester, most women don't know they're pregnant. The first sign is usually a missed period or frequent urination or an upset stomach in the morning, called morning sickness.
On the outside, a woman in these early stages of pregnancy may not look any different, but inside the uterus there is enormous activity. About 2 weeks after the egg is released, cells in one area of the zygote begin to fold in on themselves, creating multiple layers that form the embryo.
The embryo is surrounded by membranes and bathed in fluid called amniotic fluid. The umbilical cord, which connects the embryo to the placenta, begins to form.
The cells move and rearrange themselves as they form the beginnings of the body organs. At this stage, a yolk sac provides nourishment.
As the embryo grows, many things happen at once. A head-like bulge grows as the brain begins to form and expand rapidly. Another bulge that will develop into the heart pushes out and begins to pulse. The beginnings of the spinal cord, lungs, and kidneys form. Buds push out where the arms and legs will be. At this early stage, the embryo has a tail.
After 8 weeks, the yolk sac is gone, and the beginning of all the body systems have been formed. The embryo is now called a fetus. At the end of the first trimester, the fetus is 2.5 to 3 inches long and weighs less than an ounce. About half of this length is the head with its bulging brain. Eyelids are present and closed. The limbs are small with tiny fingers and toes that may be webbed. The tail, which was obvious in early development, is almost gone.
If you think of the stages of pregnancy as the process by which you write a paper, the first trimester is the outline. All the major parts are there, but they don't work together yet.
During the second trimester, the outline is turned into a rough draft and is fleshed out with more details. This trimester tends to be an easier time for the pregnant woman. Her morning sickness usually disappears and she may have more energy. She'll begin to gain weight as the fetus grows. This is Karen and Todd. They met several years ago in France where Karen lived and got married.
Pregnancy doesn't mean that you're sick, you're just pregnant, but you have to take care of yourself also. Every step in the pregnancy is really important to be healthy. It's really important that you eat right and you get your fluids every day and rest as much as I can also. I'm not smoking anymore and I'm not drinking any alcohol.
If you're taking in the smoke, it's like your baby's smoking too, and I would hope no one would ever want, want their baby to smoke.
At around 20 weeks, Karen had a sonogram done to check on the health of the fetus and also find out its sex. A sonogram is an ultrasound imaging technique that allows you to visualize the fetus inside the womb.
We found out it was a girl and we were very, very happy. When I look at this picture, I finally realized that it's real. In 4 months, I'm gonna be holding her and I'm gonna be a mother.
4 days ago, for the first time, I felt her. Karen's felt her for several weeks, but hasn't been strong enough to feel it on the outside, and it's awesome.
By the 20th week, the fetal nerves and muscles begin to function. The fetus begins to move actively. Its kicks and punches can be felt. It makes a sucking motion with its mouth and may suck its thumb.
By the 27th week, a fine hair covers the body. Eyelashes and eyebrows appear. The heart has developed, and the fetal heartbeat can be heard with a stethoscope. The fetus is about 11 inches long and weighs about 1.5 pounds.
The third trimester involves filling in still more details and putting all the pieces together so they work with one another.
If we go back to our term paper analogy, it's like writing a final draft of the paper.
The brain grows rapidly as the characteristic folds form. The nervous system continues to develop and begins to control unconscious body functions such as body temperature. The lungs continue to mature.
In male fetuses, the testes, which have been inside the body, begin to descend into the scrotum. There is rapid weight gain and growth in size.
The pregnant woman who may not have gained much weight during the first 2 trimesters blossoms. Her abdomen protrudes as the fetus grows larger and larger. As the uterus enlarges to accommodate the growing fetus, it presses on the bladder and bowel. Frequent trips to the bathroom become common.
We're looking forward to give birth really quick now because she's moving a lot, so of course you want her out and hold her and also get rid of that weight. I gained about 15 pounds since the beginning of my pregnancy. Walking it's pretty hard right now because it's really heavy. And then I don't see my feet, so I need to walk very slow, so to make sure I'm not gonna trip.
By 34 weeks, there is rhythmic breathing and the lungs are finally mature. The brain can detect input from the senses, such as sound. The fetus is less active than earlier because it no longer has room to move about.
After about 37 weeks, the fetus is fully developed, even though birth may not occur for another few weeks. All the body systems are formed and working. The fetus is about 19 to 21 inches long and weighs 6 to 8 pounds as fetal weight gain slows.
The only thing that remains is giving birth. The signals that indicate that birth is near are called labor.
No one is sure what triggers labor to begin. Some think that the pregnant woman's body sends the message to the brain. Others think the fully developed baby sends the message. Either way, the brain secretes a hormone that says now is the time.
The early stages of labor can last from a few hours to days. As labor progresses, contractions become stronger and closer together. When the cervix is fully dilated or open, contractions of the uterus force the fetus headfirst into the vagina and out into the world. And a baby is born.
The birth process is almost over, but not quite. After the baby is delivered, the placenta is released from the uterus and passes out through the vagina.
So this is Isla. She was born the 21st of July.
When she was born, she weighed about 6 pounds 11 ounces and was about 20 inches long. She was all healthy and perfect and beautiful, and I held her in my arms. It was really wonderful, and I just felt so thankful. Life has changed a lot because Isla is at the center of everything now. We have to sort of be ready to give her what she needs.
She needs to be fed like every 2 hours and change also a lot. We're pretty tired and we are trying to get some sleep whenever she's napping.
Well, now that Isla is actually out in the world and in our arms, in our home, and you're just amazed that she started out as a little microscopic little little thing there. It's incredible.
Every step of human sexual reproduction is incredible.
The process depends on the different biologies of the male and female reproductive systems that make it possible for a male sperm to fertilize a female's egg, and for each parent to contribute genetic information to the zygote that results.
And once fertilization takes place, the incredible process continues as the zygote rapidly divides, travels down the fallopian tube, and becomes implanted in the uterus. Here, multiple layers of cells form the embryo.
The growth and development of the embryo and fetus is a complex process through which the brain and heart and all the organs take shape and eventually become functional. until after approximately 9 months, a baby is born.
It is a process that is repeated countless times, making possible new life and the perpetuation of the human species.